Hey, and welcome to another Tech Tuesday. This is Chad from Ascension Worship. This week we are again in the City Worship Studio, and today we are once again playing with Waves SuperRack Performer, though this time we're going to be using it with the Behringer X32. Today we're going to be looking at some advanced routing for how you can get the most out of these two guys together. You may or may not have already seen some similar videos from other guys like Churchfront with Jake Goslin or Drew Brashler. They've done excellent videos on this. We're going to take the different ideas, different ways you can connect all this, and we're going to make like a super routing going on. Not only are we going to have potentially all 32 channels going through the console, we're also going to have inserts for vocals, and we're also, very importantly, going to have kill switches in case something, God forbid, goes wrong. So let's hop right into it and have some fun.
Hey, what do you say? Yes, it's that time again. It's Tech Tuesday.
So first off, let's talk about what is Waves SuperRack Performer, where should you use it, and more importantly, where should you not use it. SuperRack has been around for many years in different variations. This is the specifically native version, meaning you don't have to own a Waves server for this to work. You can use your existing hardware. So today I have a 2018 MacBook Pro with 16 gigs of RAM that we're going to be using. And you can really use any computer that you can run Waves on, but we're connecting it through the USB port on the console. We're not using a specific Waves card, and there's good and bad to that, but we are going to make it work. But the cool thing is that Waves SuperRack has become way more affordable than it used to be. The native version used to cost like $600 or $800. Now it's only $100. The Waves plugins, this is not sponsored by Waves, by the way, though I would love a sponsorship Waves if you're out there. But the plugins are now very affordable. You can get them as part of a subscription, or you can buy them individually. We're going to be talking about two main plugins today, the real-time tune, and then also the Waves F6, which is one of my favorites. But you can buy as many different plugins as you want. A lot of the newer Waves plugins are zero latency, which is awesome. So yeah, the whole thing's a lot more affordable, but there are some tricky things that we need to do in the routing to get this to work right, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So when you're picking and choosing your plugins and how you're going to use this, I would suggest to you to try to keep things simple, at least from the start, and I know that's going to be very difficult for anytime we have new toys, but I would suggest that you try to make your Waves plugins do specifically the things that your console, in this case the X32, cannot do. So again, the two biggest things for me are going to be that there is no auto-tune built into the X32, so we're going to use the Waves tune, and then the F6 is amazing when it comes to problem solving EQ. It's a dynamic EQ, so some really cool things you can do to clean up harsh vocals, drum bleed, that kind of stuff. What you don't want to do are things that if you had to turn them off in a moment's notice, are they going to be super detrimental to your sound to not have them? So you don't want to have major EQ changes, major level changes. You mostly want to do those troubleshooting things that I'm talking about that if you had to turn them off, you would notice, but your crowd probably would not notice that they were happening. What you don't want to do are have things like major EQ that is working on feedback problems, for example. Because X feedback, as cool of a plugin as it is, if you are using it like crazy, and then your pastor is standing out in front of your PA, and all of a sudden something goes wrong and you have to kill those plugins, is it going to immediately start feeding back? Is it going to be a problem? If so, then maybe you shouldn't go that crazy with the Waves plugins in that particular instance. So that said, you can pick and choose what you want to do, but I encourage you to be very, very utilitarian with the things that you wanted to get out of this, at least to start with. All right, with all that out of the way, let's get into the patching. We're going to start on my laptop here on Waves. I have a brand new session open. We are going to hop over to the setup page. You need to make sure that your device is your console. In this case, I'm using the X USB card. The buffer size, you want this as low as you can go without getting pops, clicks, and audio dropouts, which would be a great name for a ska band. So for me, it seems like 96 is working really well lately, but you can go as low as 32. As you increase the buffer size, you will have less load on your computer, but you'll also increase the amount of latency you're experiencing. So you need to kind of find that middle ground. You want it as little latency as possible, but you cannot have pops and clicks in your sound. So for me, we're going with 96. Again, in the setup menu, we're going to go over here to settings. We're going to change our configuration to 32 racks. Down here where it says startup session, as a default, it's usually going to be on previous session. I'm going to suggest you go to last state so that if you forget to save or something crashes, when it comes back up, it'll be at the previous state, not at whatever the previous saved scene was. And that would be a better way to go, in my opinion. All right, moving over to the show button. Sorry, not show, patch. I'm not going to go into this for this episode, but we're going to take latency group 1 here. I'm going to call it all, and we are going to just patch all 32 channels to this one latency group just so that they're all synced up together. And of course, you can change that later on. Okay, moving over to overview 1, we currently have now 32 racks in SuperRack, none of which have any ins or outs on there. It's kind of tedious to go through and do them manually, so we are going to go to this little down arrow at the top left-hand corner, go to auto route all racks and hit OK, and it will very quickly give you a one-to-one patch across all of your racks, which is generally the way you want to go. You want to keep things as simple as possible because you will see the routing is going to get a little bit more complicated as we go on. So for now, we are done with SuperRack. Let's move back over to the old X32, and hopefully you guys can see this okay on my camera setup here. I'm going to go to routing, and we're going to scroll all the way to the right until you get to the user ins and outs. We're going to use these as a means of making all the magic happen today. So we are going to change our user inputs. Today, I have a mock scene pulled up in here. Very, very simple. I have 16 channels. I am using local inputs 1 through 16. My microphone is in the Vox 1 channel here, which is channel 9, which happens to also be input 9, which happens to also be local input 9. So keep that in mind. That'll be important as we go later on. I do also have on my quote unquote kick channel, I just have some noise that's playing from an iPad just so we can make sure that everything's coming through right. And you'll see why that's important as we get going here. Okay, so back to our routing. All right, so we're going to start with our user outputs. This is what we are sending to our Waves computer. So we are going to go user output 1 is going to send local input 1, and I'm going to hit assign and next and just alternate through these and get 16 channels routed. We'd want to do 32 if we're using all 32 today, but for a little bit of brevity, we're going to go like this. Okay, so we are now sending our sources to our user outputs. We now need to send those user outputs to our computer. So we're going to tab over to the left until we get to our card outs. As a default, they're set to local 1 through 32. We're going to just change those to user out 1 through 32. And again, today I'm just going to use 16. Okay. So now we are sending those 2 channels. Again, my vocal is coming down 9 and showing up in rack 9 here. And I'm going to just call this 1 Vox. And then you can see we have our noise, which is supposed to simulate our kick drum on rack 1. So we'll call that kick. Cool. Okay, so we now have our signal going into our computer. We now want to do whatever kind of processing we want to do that. And then we need to send that back into our mixer. So back over onto the mixer. We're going to tab all the way to the right again. And we're going to go to our user inputs this time. And we, for this first example, are going to do card in 1 through 32, or in this case, 1 through 16. Sweet. All right, and then we want to be able to send those to our actual channels. So we're going to tab all the way to the left and into our input blocks. As a default, they're set up to local 1 through 32. We are going to, in this case, change those to user in 1 through 32, or in this case, 1 through 16. And now my voice is coming straight from SuperRack into the X32. And I can demonstrate that because if I mute SuperRack, hey, it is going through there. Cool. So now all 32 of our channels are coming into the board. The console setting gain, I'll show you that in a second, and then sending through the card to the computer. Computer does its magic, sends back through the card, and then into our channel strips at the top of every channel strip that we have active on here. So this is a good time to go ahead and set up 2 snippets. One will be a live mode, which is basically where we were to start with, no Waves stuff involved whatsoever. And the other one will be a Waves mode, which is what we're hearing right now. So I'm going to go to Scenes, tab over to Snippets. And you can see I've actually already done this on here, but we're going to update these. So my second snippet on here is called Waves. And before I update it, I just want you to notice that the parameters that I have set on here are insert, routing, user in, user out, and then channels 9 through 12, which are my vocal channels. And all this will make sense as we keep going here. So we're going to go ahead and hit save, save, confirm. So that's now loaded into the Wave snippet. Let's real quick, we're going to go back to routing, back to our user inputs, and let's switch those back to being our actual sources, in this case, local 1 through 16. Okay, and we're back to hearing our audio directly without Wave stuff. So let's save this over the live setting. So again, scenes, snippets, go up to live. Again, I have selected insert, routing, user in, user out, channels 9 through 12. Save, save, confirm. So now from this screen, I can click on Waves, and now we're back to hearing everything through the computer. Or I go back to live, and we're hearing everything without the computer. Now, trying to get to this screen might be a bit much, so let's set up some assignable buttons to get us there a little bit quicker. So in my assignable section, I'm going to hit the View button. I'm going to be working with Set C. So on our screen, we'll go to Set C. And again, I've already done this, but button 11 and 12 are my bottom right-hand 2 buttons. Button 11, I've done Snippet Recall Live. Button 12, Snippet Recall Waves. And then I've also set up button 10 to do Jump to Page, Scene, Bits. I don't know why they call it bits instead of snippets. Yeah, whatever. And the reason why I did that is because I can change these settings at any point, no matter what I'm looking at. So I can go Waves, and we're at Waves. Live, and we're at Live. I have found that sometimes when you are on like the home page for a channel and you do that, there's like a weird glitch where it takes a little bit longer than it should, and sometimes you hear the change happening. So if you're in a dangerous spot and your computer starts to crash or something starts to go weird, it's a good idea just to hit the the bits page and then change. So now we're in Waves, now we're in Live, and just trust me, this seems to work the best. Cool, and we are done with the first part. We now have our audio set up to where every single channel is going through Waves and then coming back in, depending on if we are in live or in Waves mode here, which is really cool. So moving on to the second part of this video, we are going to set up, in this case 4, but you can do as many as 6 vocal channels that are not going to go the normal path. They're going to use the insert point on the channels instead, which will be useful for vocalists. So let's hop right in. This is where things are going to get a little bit weird, so stick with me here. If you have a weird patch, I suggest you write it down on a piece of paper and just kind of know what's what. But we're going to flip-flop certain items for our first 4 inputs. Now on my console, that happens to be channels 1 through 4, which are listening to local inputs 1 through 4. We're going to be swapping those with my vocal channels, which happen to be channels 9 through 12, which are inputs 9 through 12, local inputs 9 through 12. Okay, so if you have something different than that, again, write down on a sheet of paper so that you can follow this down the line. I would also suggest that you don't do this while people are on stage. Turn your PA down or off while you're doing this, because there will be some weird patching things that I would suggest you just test to make sure everything's good before you start turning your system back on. And of course, save your scene before you do this, just in case you mess up. All right, so that all out of the way, I'm going to put my mic down for a moment here. And we are going to start by swapping outputs on SuperRack for, again, 1 through 4 and 9 through 12. So I'm going to, just on the outputs, I'm going to go down here to my kick channel. And instead of output 1, we're going to change this to 9, 10, 11, 12, and then over on Vox 1, you can see these have blanked themselves out now. We're going to change those to 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right, so we are done for the moment with SuperRack. We're now going to head back to the X32 routing. We're currently in Waves mode, which is good. For our outputs, what is going to our Waves computer, the only thing we're going to change is outputs 9 through 12. Instead of being the input, the local 9 through 12, we're going to change those to be aux out. Make sure you do out, not in, 1 through 4. Okay. All right, now we're going to switch over to our inputs. And for inputs 1 through 4, those are going to change. Instead of being card 1 through 4, going to be card 9 through 12. And then for inputs 9 through 12, which would have normally been our card, we are going to change this to our original source, which again is local 9 through 12. All right. We're going to tab all the way over to the left to our input blocks. All this is correct so far, except that we would have these all be user 1 through 32. The big thing we're going to change on here now is our aux in. Instead of being the actual aux ins, which are the 1/4-inch inputs on the back of the board, we're going to replace the first 4 of those, and we're going to go down to card 1 through 4. Not user 1 through 4, card 1 through 4. Okay. And let's listen back. Check, 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 check. Okay, so everything seems to be right so far. We have our noise, we have my voice. Everything is coming through the channels on here, right? Or at least it's about to be. So we have my voice, we have our kick drum noise. Okay, so the last thing we need to do on here is I'm going to select my Vox 1 channel 9, home, go to the config tab, and we're going to change our insert point to aux 1, hit the insert button, and now we are hearing my voice coming through Waves as the insert. Also, just make sure that your insert position is set to post and not to pre. And then you would do the same thing for Vox 2, 3, and 4. There would be inserts to aux 2, aux 3, and aux 4. Cool. And then let's finally go to, again, scenes, snippets, and save over our Waves settings on here. And cool. Okay, so why is this important? It may not be obvious to you because you're not me right now. Listening to this microphone and hearing it going through the Waves system, and I'm also hearing my head reverberate with my voice, happening in real time. It sounds a little bit like there's a chorus effect going on for my voice. It would probably be fine if I was playing an instrument, but with my head reverberating, it is different. So we are currently listening, you and I, to what the crowd would be hearing, and it won't really make any difference to them because they're not having their head reverberate the same way. I'm going to now switch over. This is what the musician would be hearing. And so it's different. This is everything without the waves processing. So I can go on here and hit mute. Hey, and it has no effect on what we're hearing here. But again, in the house, hey. So this gives us the ability to send them the non-processed audio. The other important thing to be aware of, because we use inserts the way we did, every other channel, the waves processing is at the start of the chain. On these channels, the waves processing is after the compressor. So just keep that in mind. That will change your signal flow up just a little bit. But this is great. So now I have a live setting that I can go to, and at this point I can change my gain for my inputs, and then when I want to hear the waves processing, I can go to my waves setting, and now I have the waves processing in here. We now have trim on everything except for our vocal channels, and we're all good to go. So there you have it. I hope that's helpful to someone out there. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below, and until next time, have a great week. Again, this is Chad from Ascension Worship. I hope this has been helpful for you and your team. Come back here every Tuesday for new information.